America, a paradise for parental child kidnappers, supported by corrupt sanctuary city judges, exposing the atrocious, corrupt family court system and the ruthless plague of legalized governmental child kidnapping in the USA and other countries around the world. Remember 17-year-old SAVANNAH DIETRICH? She's the teenager who publicly called out the boys who groped her chest and stuck their fingers in her vagina while she was unconscious, and photographed the sexual assault because they wanted to remember that precious moment in history and forever brag about it to all their dickhead friends, even though a judge ordered her not to tell anyone what happened. Teenage sexual assault victim SAVANNAH DIETRICH spoke out about her assailants, breaking a judge's gag order. In response, attorneys for the teenage boys who assaulted her initially tried to fight back, but when Dietrich's story got more attention, they backpedaled. Did she get the justice she wanted by speaking out? Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian break down the story.
SAVANNAH DIETRICH from Kentucky made news a few months ago after it turned out that she was molested by two 16-year-old boys at a party when she was drunk and incoherent. And the judge basically allowed the boys to take a plea deal where they only got 50 hours of community service, a little bit of sex abuse counseling, and after they turned 18, that crime would have been expunged from their record, right? So they took that plea deal, and on top of that, the judge told SAVANNAH that she was not allowed to talk about the case or the trial with anyone. As a result, she went on Twitter and she talked about the case.
Yeah, now it's a gag order, and she wasn't interested in that gag order. She felt that she had been abused enough, and she wasn't going to let the court tell her what she could or could not say. So on Twitter, she let it go.
She did let it go. Just to give you guys a few examples of what she tweeted, she wrote, "Protect rapist is more important than getting justice for the victim in Louisville." Then she continued to write, "They said I can't talk about it or I'll be locked up, so I'm waiting for them to read this and lock me up. Fuck justice."
Damn. And so what's interesting is they were obviously trying to move this along. You know, I don't know if bury it is too strong, but...
They were trying to bury it.
Okay.
They were two good Christian boys from a private school. They didn't want to have their records screwed up. Turns out that the prosecutor, and this is the update to the story, the prosecutor went to the same private high school as them.
Well, we don't want to besmirch anybody's reputation, so let's just move it along. And by the way, to the victim, shush, right? So she wasn't having it. But here's the interesting part of the update to me. So since she fought back, then all of a sudden it became a bigger and bigger story. In the beginning, the attorney for the boys goes after her and says, "You're violating the orders," etc. Then as it becomes a big story, they're like, backpedal, 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 because this doesn't look good, right? And to me, it goes to show that she was right, because the more attention that she showed it, all of a sudden, the situation changes. And now, what's the new ruling?
Well, the new ruling is that they will not have their crime expunged from the record. What it will turn into, though, is a misdemeanor from a felony. So it will be on their record. So, you know, the consequences are a little harsher. And also on top of that, keep in mind that the lawyers for the boys dropped their contempt of court lawsuit against SAVANNAH, which means that she will not face any jail time for the fact that she tweeted and spoke about the trial.
Because it seemed like they were victimizing her again, and it seemed like a cover-up. And so when they saw the light of day, people were like, oh, okay, maybe we did let them skate. Maybe this was not the justice that she deserved. So, look, you can argue about what the kids should have gotten in terms of a jail sentence or not a jail sentence, and they didn't get jail sentences, but they got misdemeanors or a crime that will eventually be called a misdemeanor, etc. Once it was changed, once we got the transparency. And but first of all, it shows you when somebody's drunk that now she shouldn't have she got drunk and passed out, etc. But it doesn't matter at all.
No, let me.
Okay?
I don't think people understand how severe the abuse was, okay? Because what happened was, in fact, let me read you what one boy's confession was to show you how powerful this was. We lifted up her skirt and took a picture of her boobs. We just pulled down her pants. We put our fingers in her vagina because we thought it would be funny, but it wasn't, and we took a picture. And then they proceeded to show that picture to members of the lacrosse team. So everyone was snickering behind her back. People had seen this picture. She didn't even know the picture existed. She didn't find out until months after it happened.
And that's what they were trying to brush aside. You can't brush that aside. And so you can argue about, what kind of sentence they should get, but you can't argue that you could tell the victim, hey, shut up about it. We already decided that it was going to be clear to their criminal record if they didn't do anything wrong for an extra, a couple of, what basically winds up being, I think it was like around 18 months or so, right? That's ridiculously low. And then to try to quiet her was ridiculous. And she was right, because now that everybody's paying attention, they're like, yeah, of course, we meant a more severe sentence, obviously, right? That's a good old boys network, and I'm glad she stood up to it and said, I'm not having it.
Yeah, I think that it's extremely courageous, because she could have faced jail time, juvenile, detention, for the fact that she decided not to listen to the judge. It was risky, and she took that risk, and I'm happy she did it.
Melissa Harris. More of her living nightmare. The fight for her children. She exposes names of the people behind the corruption and collusion within the Connecticut Family Court and Connecticut DCF. With a gag order still in place, she feels it is not only her First Amendment right to speak out, but the only way to get the truth out about her story. Her desperate need for an attorney to defend the false allegations and trumped-up lies.
Which I had just found out recently. The family court judge, Judge O'Leary, who has denied everything, overlooked evidence from the start. I heard that she's now with the juvenile court. She's not on the case, but it's kind of ironic how Attorney Sullivan constantly asked for Judge O'Leary. Judge O'Leary, every time I got a different judge appointed to the case, every other judge was taken off the case except for Bizzuto, and Attorney Sullivan nonstop had asked for Judge O'Leary. And
so Judge Sullivan, or
Attorney Sullivan.
Attorney Sullivan is your...
My daughter, the attorney that was representing my youngest daughter's father in family court. And he's the one that showed up at the hallway of court the day that Chris Oakley had filed the false OTC order. And the reason why I say it's false OTC order is because you put numerous false statements in there knowing that they were false.
And you have the documents to back that up?
I have documents and witnesses, as well as he has paperwork that I've provided with him in the past, and from day one he has overlooked everything. And he has non-stop written false stuff knowing it's false. And he's withheld evidence, as well as the public defender, which I call public pretender because that's Attorney Feinberg. He's the one representing me for the juvenile case. He has not done anything. He has withheld evidence. He's actually removed evidence from the case. He says he's going to do stuff, file motions, and he has not done anything. And if anything, he's made matters worse, because even back then I've asked for a restraining order, and he's overlooked everything, and he's also discriminated against me.
Now,
and now he just put a motion in to withdraw from the case.
So you're without an attorney?
I am going to be without an attorney, which I actually tried to represent myself, and Avery Whetstone, that's the one who put the second gag order on me, told me I'm not allowed to represent myself, appointed me an indictment for myself, and I told her I object to this, I don't want an indictment. She said she's the judge, she put the order, and pretty much too bad. I said I wanted to represent my older daughter, because Jaquanda Bentley is the DCF worker who filed 2 false petitions, one on my younger daughter, my 3-year-old, and now my 14-year-old daughter testified against her, and she just filed a neglect petition on my older daughter, saying my older daughter's mental health, which my daughter's totally fine. She's happy, healthy, whatever. I also called the Ombudsman office to try to remove her from the case. I've asked Feinberg to remove her. They refused to listen to me. Judge Avery Whetstone appointed my daughter an indictment, regardless of what I said. Jessica Torres, the district attorney, non-stop put motions in against me, says I cannot represent myself. I asserted my civil rights.
Don't get discouraged. Sometimes our heroes make these corrupted, inconsiderate court officials pay for their crimes, as we will see now. Free advice. What is an indictment? An indictment is a formal accusation against an individual suspected of committing a crime. Indictments are generally only obtained for felony charges. An indictment is used as an alternative to a complaint in a trial court. An indictment against an individual can be obtained before any arrest is made. Indictments are used most in the federal court system, but can be used in the state court system as well. How indictments are obtained. To obtain an indictment against a suspected criminal, the prosecutor must present her case to a grand jury. A grand jury is a jury made of a group of 16 to 23 local citizens who are sworn in as a jury about every 18 months. A grand jury differs from a trial jury, as the grand jury is required to sit for a much longer period of time than a trial jury is required. There is no judge involved in a grand jury proceeding, and unlike a trial jury, which hears equally from all parties in a criminal case, the grand jury is considered to be an arm of the prosecution and generally hears only from the prosecution. For this reason, indictments are fairly easy for the prosecution to obtain. What does the grand jury do? The grand jury reviews the prosecutor's evidence against the individual and determines if the prosecutor has enough probable cause to charge the suspected individual of the crime. Once the grand jury reviews the prosecutor's case against the individual, they will determine whether or not the prosecutor has enough probable cause to move the case forward in court. If the indictment is approved, the grand jury will return a true bill, and the prosecutor will bring the indictment to court. The indictment will list all charges against the individual and set out a short. If the grand jury does not believe that the prosecutor has enough evidence to move forward to trial, they will return a no bill and the prosecution to the prosecution. After an indictment is obtained, if the prosecution successfully obtains an indictment against a suspected individual, she then brings the case to court and the individual is arraigned. An arraignment is a hearing before the judge that informs the defendant of the charges against him. The defendant then has a choice to make a plea bargain with the prosecution or to move forward with a jury trial. Justia, United States versus Williams Certiorari to the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, number 90-1972, argued January 22, 1992, decided May 4, 1992. Respondent Williams was indicted by a federal grand jury for alleged violations of 18 U.S.C. paragraphs 1014. On his motion, the district court ordered the indictment dismissed without prejudice because the government had failed to fulfill its obligation under circuit precedent to present substantial exculpatory evidence to the grand jury. Posted Fox 13 News. An alleged domestic violence victim was scolded, berated, and shamed to tears by a Seminole County Judge Jerry Collins, and now the judge is in hot water with the Florida Supreme Court for breaking several judicial codes of conduct.
Right, new at 6 now, this Seminole County judge humiliated, berated, and then threw that woman right here in jail. But it wasn't a criminal defendant she did that to. It was a domestic violence victim. All of it caught on video in the court. Now Judge Jerry Collins, is in hot water with the state Supreme Court. Fox 13's Gloria Gomez is here with the video. What happened?
Well, the judge, Mark, was upset that the victim did not show up to testify during a trial, so the judge let her have it.
This domestic violence victim was scolded.
We're required to be here by a court order.
Berated.
You disobeyed a court order.
Shamed to tears.
I'm not in a good place right now.
The victim told prosecutors she wasn't going to testify against her alleged abuser. When she didn't show up for the first day of trial, Seminole County Judge Jerry Collins dragged her into court anyway for a contempt hearing.
Your Honor, I'm very sorry for not attending last Wednesday. I've been dealing with depression.
Why didn't you show up to court?
My anxiety, and
You think you're gonna have anxiety now? You haven't even seen anxiety. We had a jury 6 people there ready to try Mr. Brennan, who has a prior criminal history.
Judge Collins was in no mood for excuses.
I've moved out. I've tried to move on with my life, and then when I filed for child support last June, when he went to jail for 2 weeks, he lost his job, he lost everything, and I'm like homeless now. I'm living at my parents' house. Everything has been shut off.
Then things went from bad to worse.
I'm not in a good place right now.
And
So
violating a court order did not do anything for you. I hereby find you in contempt of court. I sentence you to 3 days in the county jail. Turn around.
No amount of tears or apologies would make a difference.
Judge, I'll do anything. Please, please.
You should have showed up and you should have showed up.
I have a 1-year-old son and I'm trying to take care of him by myself.
Judge Collins showed no mercy.
I've already issued my order.
Now, the Supreme Court ruled that this judge acted inappropriately and broke several judicial rules of conduct. Therefore, she will be publicly reprimanded next month. She'll also be forced to go to anger management classes as well as domestic violence classes. And of course, Mark, we will continue to follow this one. Back to you.
That is really something. I'm curious what her reaction was. Did she defend herself, or at this point, when the state Supreme Court recommends that, she just accepted it?
Once the investigation was launched against her, she actually said she was sorry for her actions. She said she obviously felt that she had, misplaced her anger at the victim, and she was sorry and regretful for that. But clearly, the Supreme Court said she ought to be punished, and we'll cover it.
Yeah, some of that's the very reason a lot of domestic violence victims don't come forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good point.
Gloria, thanks.
Judge Collins reprimanded by the Florida Supreme Court.
The first case this morning is the reprimand of Judge Jerry Collins. Judge Collins, if you'll please stand. Judge Collins, we have summoned you here today because of conduct which this court has determined to be in violation of the Code of Judicial Conduct, and which now requires us to impose appropriate discipline. As a preamble to the Code of Judicial Conduct recognizes, judges individually and collectively must respect and honor the judicial office as a public trust and strive to enhance and maintain confidence in our legal system. The effectiveness of our judiciary rests ultimately on the trust and confidence that the people confer upon judges. As a result, one of this court's most important duties is to carry out the responsibility given to us in the Florida Constitution to discipline judges for misconduct. Judge Collins, you violated Canons 1, Canon 2A, and 3B sub 4 of the Code of Judicial Conduct in the course of presiding over the case of State versus Miles Brennan in Seminole County. It occurred when you berated and belittled a victim of domestic violence for failing to respond to a subpoena issued by the state attorney to testify in the trial against her abuser, who is the father of her child. As a result of the victim's failure to appear, the state was unable to proceed with the trial. Consequently, the state dismissed the charge against the defendant for dangerous exhibition of a weapon, and the defendant accepted a plea to a reduced charge of simple battery. Judge Collins, you issued an order to show cause why the victim should not be held in contempt of court for violating the trial subpoena by failing to appear for trial. When the victim appeared before you, you instituted direct criminal contempt proceedings in which the victim was not represented by counsel nor advised of her right to present evidence or testimony on her own behalf. During the contempt proceedings, you were discourteous and impatient toward the distraught victim. The victim apologized for failing to appear, citing anxiety, depression, and a desire to move on from contact with her abuser as reasons why she did not appear for trial. Meanwhile, Judge Collins, you raised your voice, used sarcasm, spoke harshly, and interrupted the victim. You found the victim in contempt of court and sentenced her to spend 3 days in jail, even though the victim pleaded with you that she needed to take care of her 1-year-old child. Furthermore, Your behavior created the appearance of partiality toward the state. Following this incident, you entered into a stipulation with the Judicial Qualifications Commission, admitting your misconduct and stipulating to a public reprimand. You explained your good faith belief that you were exercising appropriate legal authority in holding the victim in direct criminal contempt for failing to appear in response to a subpoena. You acknowledged that you should have been more patient, used less inflammatory and sarcastic language, and used a less aggressive tone during the proceedings. You accepted full responsibility for your conduct and expressed remorse that your intemperate conduct brought unnecessary criticism upon your court and the entire judiciary and could impair the public's perception of the fairness and impartiality of Florida's judicial system. We ordered you to complete an anger management course and attend a domestic violence course provided by the Florida Judicial College. We further ordered you appear here today to be publicly reprimanded on live television so that the people of Florida know and understand that conduct such as yours will not be tolerated. Judge Collins, this is indeed a sad day for you, a sad day for the people of Florida, and a sad day for the judiciary upon which our people depend for justice. I cannot emphasize enough how intolerable your behavior was in this case. Finally, I also advise you to consult the lengthy body of case law issued by this court in dealing with repeated cases of judicial misconduct by a single judge. You will find that this court has viewed any later violations by the same judge very harshly indeed. You're free to leave.
An ex-Campbell County judge indicted on charges of human trafficking, rape, by T.J. Parker, WCPO staff. Updated May 11, 2017. Frankfort, Kentucky. A Campbell County grand jury indicted a former judge last week on 11 charges related to human trafficking, rape, and sex with minors.
So much for joining us tonight. Tonight, new information on exactly how many victims former Campbell County Judge Timothy Nolan is accused of pushing into illegal activity.
In just one charge, he's accused of trafficking a minor. In another, he's accused of rape, yet he is still not in jail.
9 on your side reporter TJ Parker is live tonight in Covington. TJ, can you break down the new charges for us?
Well, Craig, Nolan was here in Kenton County Circuit Court today. He's being charged with 6 counts of human trafficking with 6 victims, and there's even more charges with more victims.
I cannot make any statements. I'd love to, other than I can tell you that we have a great Constitution, and I have a great attorney.
Let's go.
Who will vigorously defend this.
Former Campbell County Judge 70-year-old Timothy Nolan arraigned in court. His attorney, Margot Grubbs, defending Nolan, entering a plea of not guilty to all 11 counts in the indictment filed in Campbell County.
We have provided everything necessary in order to provide information and be cooperative in this matter.
Aside from human trafficking, Nolan is charged with first-degree rape, unlawful transaction with a minor, tampering with a witness, and prostitution. The indictment says Nolan, quote, intentionally subjected the under-18 victim in commercial sexual activity. It also says he caused the minor to engage in illegal controlled substances. Judge Kathleen Lape set his bond today.
To be quite honest with you, anybody else who had appeared before me with these charges against them would have a cash bond on them. Nolan is a mature individual. He is facing a lot of time in jail. I think that makes him a flipper.
The defense argues he's not because he suffers from a serious illness. Regardless, the judge ordered a $50,000 cash bond, no contact with any of the victims or minors. Grubbs spoke with us after court.
I think it's wrongfully charged, and that's exactly what we're going to prove.
Now, Nolan's attorney, who you just saw there, asked the judge to delay his payment of bond because he had a doctor's appointment today. Nolan was ordered to make that payment, though, by 5 o'clock. No word yet if that has been done. We're reporting live tonight in Covington. I'm TJ Parker, 9 on your side.
All right.
Former district judge charged with human trafficking. An arrest of a former district judge in northern Kentucky on a human trafficking charge has shocked the community. Police arrested former Campbell County District Judge Tim Nolan on charges of human trafficking and unlawful transaction with a minor, according to court documents and a release from Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear. Nolan, 70, who has been outspoken in conservative politics and the Tea Party movement in recent years, was elected to the Campbell County School Board in November. He was also the chairman of President Donald Trump's campaign in Campbell County. Court documents don't give much detail about the incident or incidents that led to the charges. Authorities allege in the criminal complaint, Nolan, in August 2016, induced a minor into illegal sexual activity and gave alcohol to the minor. It doesn't say how old the victim was. Campbell County Police had served a search warrant on Nolan's property in southern Campbell County in February. The case presents a tricky situation for the legal community due to Nolan's past as a Campbell County District Judge in the 1970s and 1980s. His daughter, Tanya Nolan Jack, is the Campbell County Circuit Court clerk. To avoid conflicts of interest, a special judge from out of the area, District Court Elizabeth Chandler from Carroll County, is presiding over the case, and all court documents are being filed in Boone County. The Attorney General's office is prosecuting. Nolan was released on $50,000 bond and placed on an ankle monitor on Friday. What action the Campbell County School Board will take wasn't clear. Chairwoman Janice Wynn-Bigler referred all questions to the district office. Superintendent David Rust did not immediately return calls for comment. "We're just learning about this," Wynn-Bigler said Friday. "The board is immensely troubled by this." Connie Polgears, Director of School Improvement, released a statement saying the district hasn't determined the next step. "We are immensely troubled and saddened to hear of the arrest of Mr. Nolan and grieve as a district for those impacted," the release stated. An ex-Campbell County judge indicted on charges of human trafficking, rape, by T.J. Parker, WCPO staff, updated May 11, 2017. Cuyahoga County Judge Lance Mason, indicted on multiple felony charges, by Rachel Dissel. A grand jury today indicted Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Lance Mason on charges of felonious assault, kidnapping, child endangering, and domestic violence after a public altercation with his wife earlier this month that authorities say left her with serious injuries. The indictment, which came hours after a judge denied his request for a special prosecutor to handle the case, means that Mason will have to step down from the bench, though he will still be paid his $121,000 annual salary while the case is pending in court. The Ohio Supreme Court made his disqualification official late Tuesday afternoon. The charges against Mason, who turned 47 today, include 5 felony-level charges and 3 misdemeanors. He is scheduled to appear in court September 10th. His attorney, Fernando Mack, could not immediately be reached for comment. Mason, who has not returned to court since his August 2nd arrest, attacked his wife, punching her in the face several times, biting and choking her while driving on Van Aken Boulevard in Shaker Heights with their children in the back seat, according to police reports. His wife suffered a fractured orbital bone and other injuries, authorities said. Mason and his wife, Aisha Frazier Mason, have been married since 2005, but separated in March. She filed for divorce days after the attack was reported. A judge has ordered that Mason should have no contact with his wife or children while the case is pending, and police seized multiple pistols, shotguns, rifles, and thousands of rounds of ammunition from his home after his arrest. More corrupted judges. Judge Mary Koch Polson, Destin, Florida, USA. Mary Koch Polson is a corrupt judge of the First Circuit Court in Florida. Polson allegedly manipulated her election to this position in 2012, effective in January of 2013, and her current term expires in 2019 if she does not get removed for corruption and abuse of power earlier. It's scary to think that Circuit Judge Mary Polson is uninformed about the laws that govern her own country. Recently, it has come to light that Polson authorized and is herself involved in the wrongful retention and kidnapping of an innocent German child. Who in their right minds would allow the imprisonment of a helpless child, let alone someone who was elected to protect the rights of all people? Judge Polson supported the illegal kidnapping of a 6-year-old child and is denying release of him back to his home country, Germany. Is this the type of person that we want making legal decisions? It is evident that corrupt Judge POLSON does not know U.S. federal law, which is unnerving considering that she was sworn in to protect the laws of the land. Does this make POLSON a liar and a corrupt child kidnapper? In the eyes of the German father, absolutely. I ask my fellow citizens of the world to support me in a petition to remove this corrupt, dangerous judge from office before she causes any more damage to the people that she was sworn in to protect, stated the father, Stefan Sherman. POLSON is making the United States of America look like a hostile and unaccepting country to the rest of the world. This is one German father that will not stand for the abuse of power that POLSON is exercising. POLSON's power complex should not be allowed in office, as it has caused her to make illegal decisions for her own personal gain. Is this in the best interest of the child? Most people are not aware that corrupt judges, like Mary POLSON, are making money on kidnapping foreign children into her territories. These kids will later be released for adoption, which is a billion-dollar industry supported by corrupt judges, such as Mary POLSON and the Child Protection Service mafia. Why would we want a judge that is so sick and twisted, representing the fine country of the United States of America? Tomorrow, anybody could be the next victim of this child-abusing, power-hungry, and sick judge who thinks she can play God with other people's lives. Based on POLSON's screwed-up mindset and her superiority complex, Judge POLSON will turn children into slaves of her court system and rip parents' hearts out for profit and power. It is obvious that Judge Mary Koch POLSON is a man-hating bitch who has, according to her criminal records, been married and divorced 4 times, besides having been arrested for drunk driving. Now, is that the kind of judge anyone wants to represent the law and not destroy the future of our children and families? This case is most disturbing in that a German father was defrauded of his child by Judge POLSON, who even went to the extent of supporting a wrongful arrest of the father for dropping his child off at school. This caused the German father to go to jail for 3 days, following Judge POLSON's court order, and being arrested at the school for trespassing. How mentally disturbed is Judge Mary Koch POLSON? Are these the kind of sick judges we want to make decisions for our country and decide tomorrow's world that our children will live in? It is time to remove corrupt Judge POLSON from office and save this poor, innocent German child who wants nothing more than to be reconnected with his father. Peter J. McBrien, Sacramento County Superior Court. Misconduct in Sacramento Family Law Court. Ulf Carlson case.
Ulf Carlson has experienced firsthand just how much damage the collusion between lawyers and judges can cause.
At the beginning of the divorce, and I had talked to some of the biggest law firms here in Sacramento, and their first question was, who is the judge and who is the opposing attorney? And I was told by numerous firms that they had a very serious concern about that relationship.
The attorney representing Ulf's wife had a close relationship with the judge, and now even serves as both an attorney and a judge in the same courthouse. Not surprisingly, Ulf's judge seemed biased against him during his trial.
Right during cross-examination, the judge just got up and left, and he never returned to the courtroom. My attorney, I think it was a couple days later, she gets called in by his clerk, and basically is informed that the trial's over with. And the interesting thing is he actually ruled against me on every single issue, not 99%, but 100%. I mean, he nailed me on everything. He ordered both properties sold, that I were to pay my exes all of her attorney fees, so I was left with no other choice than to file an appeal.
Filing an appeal is what someone does if they're trying to reverse a judge's decision. Unfortunately, the appeals court can only change a decision or order a retrial if the family court judge didn't apply the family code correctly. Aside from that, appeals courts don't have the power to change a judge's ruling, even if the judge's decisions were biased, one-sided, or cruel.
2 days after I had filed my appeal, McBrien found out about it, and and has admitted that he picked up the phone and called his buddy, who just happened to be chief of legal at the Department of General Services, where I'd worked for 18 years. And I had an impeccable work history, and I was just escorted out of the building and fired.
It became clear to Ulf that the judge was retaliating against him for filing an appeal. So Ulf submitted a complaint to the Judicial Council. This is where people can report unethical or incompetent judges. But the Judicial Council is made up of judges and lawyers, and they rarely remove a judge from office. In fact, that year there were over 1,000 complaints filed against judges in the state of California alone. Of those 1,000 complaints, none of the judges were fined, none of the judges were put in jail, and none of the judges were removed from office. Even though the Judicial Council found that Ulf's judge engaged in willful misconduct and contacted Ulf's employer, they didn't fire him. And even though the appeals court and the Judicial Council acknowledged that the judge was in the wrong, Ulf's divorce still caused him to go completely broke.
His mistake has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, I've not been reimbursed any of that money. But not fun at the age of 51 to start over. And all my other friends are talking about, getting ready for retirement at, 55 or so. And here I have to begin again. So.
Unfortunately, Ulf had no choice but to move back in with his parents who live in Scandinavia. It's another part of the world where divorce is done much differently.
Sacramento Family Court News, published on April 1st, 2014. It gets even worse. Child abuse, spouse abuse, pedophilia, molestation, and even human trafficking. The Domestic Violence Clause, in Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. On application of the state legislature or the executive governor, when the legislature cannot be convened, the United States shall protect them, the people, against domestic violence. Full text of Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this Union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. This protection is for the people. The U.S. Supreme Court so held in Texas v. White, 1868, saying it's the people who are guaranteed this protection. Bad parents get custody of the child. Riverside County Judge Kelly Hansen orders children back to an abusive mother with a long rap sheet of abuse. I'm a father trying to fight for them.
Kiddo. I'm gonna go talk to a man, okay?
Come here, baby. Come here. It's okay, baby. It's okay. You're gonna talk to the judge, okay? You get to talk to the judge, baby. It's okay. It's gonna be okay, boo-boo. Madison. Maddie. Maddie, Daddy's here. Madison, Daddy's here. Dad, Maddie, come here, baby. Come here, baby. See? Like I said, come here, baby. Come here. It's okay, Madison, listen to me, baby. Listen. Remember I told you you're gonna talk to the judge? Remember I told you get to talk to the judge, okay?
Okay.
You get to talk to the judge, okay, baby?
Okay.
It's gonna be okay. Remember I told you it's gonna be okay? It's gonna be okay, baby. Look at daddy. Look at daddy. Look at daddy. Is daddy crying? You see me crying? Because it's gonna be okay. Okay, baby? It's gonna be okay. Daddy's not crying. It's gonna be okay. But listen, you guys have to ride to court with mommy, okay? You have to ride in the car with mommy.
Okay.
The judge said, if I put you in my car, the judge is gonna get me. I'm gonna get in trouble by the judge. Remember I told you about following rules? Remember I said we have to follow rules? It's okay, Kiwi. It's okay, baby. It's okay, baby. It's okay. You just gotta tell them where you wanna live. Okay? You don't want to go home where?
With Mommy.
I know, baby. I told the judge this. I told the judge this already. Okay? Okay? Your girl's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, babies, alright? It's gonna be okay. Daddy love you, okay? It's okay. I'm gonna pray for you. Wanna pray? Okay, hold on. Here we go. Drop my phone and please help me push him out the door. Drop me, please put your husband and my kids out there. They really need you, Father. Please support them financially. They really need you. They need. Let the judge see that allegations, everything is saying is false. Let the judge see that the kids need to be home with me, Father. It's gonna be okay. Please call my kids now, Jehovah. I beg of you. And please forgive us for our sins because we do fall short. And I pray to you through your Son, Christ Jesus. Amen. It's gonna be okay, baby, okay? Listen to me. You have to ride in the car with Mommy right now, okay? But guess what? Guess what? I'm going to the courthouse too, okay? So when you get out the car, I'll be right there, okay? Okay, Kiwi? Kiwi, don't cry, baby. When I get out the car,
Mommy's gonna take you, baby girl.
you have, baby. If you don't go with Mommy, then the judge's not gonna let you live with me, okay? Okay, baby? Go with Mommy. You have to go, okay?
Citation of the U.S. Constitution against sexual exploitation of children. 18 U.S. Code, Section 2251. Sexual exploitation of children. A. Any person who employs, uses, persuades, induces, entices, or coerces any minor to engage in, or who has a minor assist any other person to engage in, or who transports any minor in, or affecting interstate or foreign commerce, or in any territory or possession of the United States, with the intent that such minor engage in any sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of producing any visual depiction of such conduct, or for the purpose of transmitting a live visual depiction of such conduct, shall be punished as provided under subsection E. If such person knows or has reason to know that such visual depiction will be transported or transmitted using any means or facility of interstate or foreign commerce, or in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce, or mailed, if that visual depiction was produced or transmitted using materials that have been mailed, shipped, or transported in, or affecting interstate or foreign commerce by any means, including by computer, or if such visual depiction has actually been transported or transmitted using any means or facility of interstate or foreign commerce, or in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce, or mailed. International Law and Human Trafficking by Lindsay King. Instruments of International Law. International law is a powerful conduit for combating human trafficking. The most reputable and recent instruments of international law that have set the course for how to define, prevent, and prosecute human trafficking are the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its two related protocols. The United Nations Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, and the United Nations Protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, sea, and air, which entered into force in 2003 and 2004. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, created these conventions, which have supported international law's ability to combat human trafficking. In support of enforcing these instruments, the UNODC established the United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking, UN-GIFT, in 2007. Instruments that have dealt with human trafficking date back to the abolition of slavery. They include provisions within the Slavery Convention, 1926, and the Supplementary Convention on the Abolition of Slavery, the Slave Trade, and Institutions and Practices Similar to Slavery, 1956. Additional tools of international law that include segments against the trafficking of persons include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, 1966, the United Nations Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons and of the Exploitation of the Prostitution of Others, 1949, and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, 1979. These instruments laid the foundation for the contemporary conventions and efforts to eliminate trafficking. Associated Press, published on YouTube. President Donald Trump says he will bring the full force and weight of the U.S. government to combat an epidemic of human trafficking. Trump is meeting at the White House with advisors and organizations that deal with trafficking. February 23rd.
I want to make it clear today that my administration will focus on ending the absolutely horrific practice of human trafficking, and I am prepared to bring the full force and weight of our government to the federal and at the federal level and the other highest levels, whatever we can do in order to solve this horrific problem, getting worse, and it's happening in the United States. In addition to the rest of the world, but it's happening in the United States, which is terrible. Human trafficking is a dire problem, both domestically and internationally, and is one that's made really a challenge, and it's really made possible to a large extent, more of a modern phenomenon by what's taking place on the internet, as you probably know. Solving the human trafficking epidemic, which is what it is a priority for my administration. We're going to help out a lot. Solve is a wonderful word, a beautiful word, but I can tell you we're going to help a lot. I'll direct the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies that have a role in preventing human trafficking to take a hard look at the resources and personnel that they're currently devoting to this fight. Now, they are devoting a lot, but we're going to be devoting more. Dedicated men and women across the federal government have focused on this for some time. As you know, a lot of you have been dealing with the federal government, and it's been much more focused over the last 4 weeks, I can tell you that. I cannot thank each of you enough, and the dedicated men and women who run my staff and your staffs, and getting everybody together was terrific. I was so glad I was able to be here. You start with really a tremendous amount of energy and blood, sweat, and tears. Government can be helpful, but without you, nothing would happen. So, again, I want to thank everybody in this room. It's a very, very terrible problem. It's not talked about enough. People don't know enough about it. And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to bring it out into the open, and hopefully we're going to do a great deal to help prevent some of the horrific, really horrific crimes that are taking place.
Crimes against humanity, as per the UN. The term crimes against humanity was used for the first time in 1915 by the Allied governments, France, Great Britain, and Russia, when issuing a declaration condemning the mass killings of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. However, it was only after World War II, in 1945, that crimes against humanity were for the first time prosecuted at the International Military Tribunal, IMT, in Nuremberg. Both the charter establishing the IMT in Nuremberg, as well as that establishing the IMT for the Far East in Tokyo, included a similar definition of the crime. Crimes against humanity have not yet been codified in a dedicated treaty of international law, unlike genocide and war crimes, although there are efforts to do so. Despite this, the prohibition of crimes against humanity, similar to the prohibition of genocide, has been considered a peremptory norm of international law from which no derogation is permitted and which is applicable to all states. Children's rights, international laws. UN Declaration of the Rights of the Child, 1959. The UN Declaration of the Rights of the Child, DRC, builds upon rights that had been set forth in a League of Nations Declaration of 1924. The preamble notes that children need special safeguards and care, including appropriate legal protection before as well as after birth, reiterates the 1924 Declaration pledge that mankind owes to the child the best it has to give, and specifically calls upon voluntary organizations and local authorities to strive for the observance of children's rights. Ashton Kutcher testifies about human trafficking before Congress.
It is an honor to be here. As a young man raised and brought up in the public school system, I
pledge my allegiance to that flag every single day. And the honor, maybe one of the greatest honors of my life today, is to be here and leverage the work that I've done as testimony that may in some way benefit this nation that I love. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Chairman Corker for your leadership in this endeavor, and to Senator Cardin. Your leadership has been extraordinary, and I'd like to also say thank you to the rest of the committee that has supported this effort. This is a bipartisan effort, and in a country that is riddled with bipartisan separation on so many things, slavery seems to come up as one of these issues that we can all agree upon. And I applaud you for your agreement, and I believe in you and your leadership and your ability to take us out of it. I'm here today to defend the right to pursue happiness. It's a simple notion, the right to pursue happiness. It's bestowed upon all of us by our Constitution. Every citizen of this country has the right to pursue it. And I believe that it is incumbent upon us as citizens of this nation, as Americans, to bestow that right upon others, upon each other, and upon the rest of the world. But the right to pursue happiness for so many is stripped away. It's raped. It's abused. It's taken by force, fraud, or coercion. It is sold for the momentary happiness of another. And this is about the time when I start talking about politics that the internet trolls tell me to stick to my day job. So I'd like to talk about my day job. My day job is as the chairman and the co-founder of Thorn. We build software to fight human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children. And that's our core mission. My other day job is that of the father of two, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old. And as part of that job that I take very seriously, I believe that it is my effort to defend their right to pursue happiness and to ensure a society and government that defends it as well. As part of my anti-trafficking work, I've met victims in Russia. I've met victims in India. I've met victims that have been trafficked from Mexico, victims in New York and New Jersey and all across our country. I've been on FBI raids where I've seen things that no person should ever see. I've seen video content of a child that's the same age as mine being raped by an American man that was a sex tourist in Cambodia. And this child was so conditioned by her environment that she thought she was engaging in play.
Whistleblower is someone who informs on an individual, a company, or an institution that are engaged in illegal matters. We will continue now by showing you videos of courageous whistleblowers that have stepped forward and come out to denounce these crimes, risking their own lives, which some of them have tragically lost. Nancy Schaefer report explains that the funding continues as long as the child is out of the home. There is funding for foster care when a child is placed with a new family. Then, adoption bonus funds are available. When a child is placed in a mental health facility and is on 16 drugs per day, like 2 children of a constituent of mine, more funds are involved, and so is Medicaid.
The bill 415 called for the time allotted for the Department of Human Resources to provide emergency care to a child without a court order to be reduced from 7 days to 72 hours. It required a court order to enter the residence of a parent or guardian to seize a child. It called for family court to be open to the public. Confidentiality and secrecy in family court protects the wrong people. It provided that immunity in the system shall not extend to the seizures of children that are found to be in violation, nor to the administration of medication to a child over the objection of the parent or custodian, and it provided the state from applying for, obtaining, receiving, or accepting adoption incentive payments under the Federal Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997. The Department of Child Protective Services has become a protected empire built on taking children and separating families. This is not to say that there are not those children who do need to be removed from wretched situations and need protection. However, my report is concerned with the children and parents caught up in legal kidnapping. Having worked with probably 300 cases statewide and hundreds across the country, and in nearly every state, I am convinced there is no accountability in Child Protective Services.
You know, I was a special investigator for Child Protective Services in Texas from February 2012 to March 2013. You know, I already was a libertarian whenever I joined, but I kind of bought into the idea that Child Protective Services would be the one agency where I could actually help children, though they were a branch of the government. You know, they'd be the ones who would actually be helping. And I found that I was wrong on every single level. What I saw was not just, you know, normal bureaucratic corruption that's reported on local news, but an entire system that was kind of built to fail. The power the investigators had and CPS held, which was kind of the power over every single child, and the ability to be able to destroy lives, is one that wasn't really handled carefully. I didn't quit because, as some people in the agency stated, I didn't have the toughness for it, or, you know, this takes special kind of people. I quit because what we were doing was not helping people, but instead destroying lives.
She worked for DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, in LA County for 10 years in various capacities, including social worker, supervisor, investigator, and court officer. She was known for handling tough cases that the other social workers could not handle. And when she left the agency, she left on good terms. One of the alarming trends Melinda revealed was that programs in place to preserve families were being defunded at an alarming rate in favor of receiving billions of dollars in federal aid for adoption services. She states that group foster homes get an average of $8,000 per child per month, just in LA County.
An unprecedented case of judicial corruption is unfolding in Pennsylvania.
A state district judge in Las Cruces has been indicted on bribery charges.
Mark Chivarella and Michael Conahan were convicted of receiving kickbacks for more than $2 million.
Monday's arrest of Guadalupe County Judge Michael Wiggins has sent shockwaves through the city of Seguin.
Well, the special prosecutor in this case was hoping today's hearing would end with Judge Michael Murphy in handcuffs.
Frequently there were no lawyers. Frequently you were told before you were found guilty what the sentence was going to be.
There are also claims he solicited bribes for Richardson from applicants for other judgeships.
Payments were made to the judges, it is alleged, in return for discretionary acts by the judges favoring these businesses.
The judges could face at least 7 years in federal prison.
My kid's not here! He's dead! Because of him! He ruined my life! Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's gone!
The movie is all about exposing the fact that we no longer have laws that are enforced, because judges do whatever they want to do. America has also become lawless because government officials are dishonest and/or corrupt. The movie will expose corruption in every state. The movie will focus on victims. Corrupt judges and corrupt government officials will be exposed, and we will confront a number of the crooks.
My name is Gregory Rose. I'm a lifetime Wichita, Kansas resident, and my journey through this corruption started in October of '07 when my daughter, I'd found out she had been gypping school, and I punished her by taking away her phone and car, and she wound up running away from home with her and my granddaughter with an illegal Mexican. I had called the police, made a runaway report, and did my own investigation. I had located her. I called the police department, and the first time they knocked on the wrong door. The second time they found her, and then she turned on me, said she was scared of me, and then the police turned on me, who had called them to begin with, and that's when the journey in the child in need of care system started for my daughter and my granddaughter. They took my daughter to the children's home, and from there she went to the first foster home, should see. She was being abused there. That was a system called the Farm we have here in Kansas. It's a very crooked organization. She was removed from that and set in another home, and from then she did not change. She was never been a bad mother. My daughter's never been on drugs and alcohol, but she has made some less than smart decisions on some in her life. Well, about the second deal, she did not change her my granddaughter's diaper fast enough for the foster woman or something, so they separated them, and they sent my daughter out to a little town about 15 miles from the Colorado border. While she was out there, she was raped by a boy in the town. And I got her taken out of there, and she was moved in numerous different foster homes. And of course, this cost us the taxpayer money to drive back and forth for the visitations with me. At first, I had visitations in my home, and then even though I had never directly threatened any of the people in this case, the Youthville people case, they thought they was threatened. So then I had to start going to Youthville and for visitation to see my daughter and my granddaughter. I was never given an unsupervised visit. They forced me to take parenting classes and anger management classes, even though I've never had any problems with anger issues, and I had already taken love and logic classes to my church because I've been a Christian since I was 16 years old. And so a lot of it has to do with money. And my daughter made some mistakes in the system, but I've been totally abused. I was made to not only, take the parenting classes and anger management classes, but an issue with a guardian ad litem, who I totally believe should be eliminated. There should not be guardian ad litems, that I may have been the father of my grandchild. So I was forced to take a DNA test, which I agreed to because I had nothing to hide, and of course it come back negative. And then I was forced to get a psychological examination at my own cost, which of course said that I had strong views, like that's bad, Christian views and everything. And so the psychological report, there's nothing really bad in there. They say I'm narcissistic and a few other things, but they twisted a lot of my words. This happened at WSU. I don't believe in psychology myself. It was invented by atheists. Anyway, that happened, was another assault on my character. Well, during this time, around the end of 2007, 2008, I had heard about a group named Citizens for Change, and they was meeting in a conference room at Rusty Eck, and I went to that, and I heard from a nationally known speaker called Richard Wexler, who's authority on these issues. He travels the United States. And then at that meeting, I had met people, and I got involved with a group called Sunflower Community Action, which is no longer around. They had a family and children rights group. And that's when I met a lot of other people going to the picket, trying to get legislation changed, picketing, helping candidates to try to replace our local district attorney, who is a practicing Wiccan, who is an evil woman. All during this time, they don't like you giving out information to people to get help for this crazy, lawless, evil system.
I'd like to talk briefly about what happened to me while I was a judge. During that time, I developed ovarian cancer and was in the hospital and was only 48 hours out of surgery when I got a call from the office that demanded that I come right in, irregardless of the fact that I had just come out of surgery and was actually full of pain medication. The demand was from my supervisor, Larry Abrams, to come into the office at the direction of the district director, Olafius Perry. So I went into the office via ambulance, and I asked them what could possibly be so important that I had to take the IVs out and come via ambulance to this office. And he said, there were three of them, Christine Siegel, Larry Abrams, and Olafius Perry, the director of the LA office, asked me to change a decision I had written. Now, my boss had a case in his office for about 7 years. He had heard actually the case before him and had never written the decision up. And he asked if I would write it up for him. And I said that I'd be glad to. I was on my way to the hospital, but I was waiting for a bed at Cedars-Sinai. So I wrote a 63-page decision with probably 85 footnotes. And in that decision, I found that the Securities and Exchange Commission had discriminated against two of their attorneys, Asian national origin, and also had not been fairly paid, according to the men attorneys in the office. So I found for them on two separate violations of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Pay Act. What happened is that that decision was completed and accepted by my boss. But in the interim, one of the women had lunch with the commissioner, Jacqueline Berrien, and she said, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't our commissioner today, it was Carrie Dominguez, and she said that she indeed hadn't ever received a decision after her hearing and that she wondered what happened to her case. And the commissioner basically said, I don't know, I'll look into it, probably got lost in the mail. Well, there were two women, Dijon and Bordeaux, that were the attorneys in this particular case against the SEC. And my commissioner, the chairwoman, said, you know, I don't want the SEC, a sister agency, to suffer. So I don't want there to be a finding against the SEC. First of all, so many years have passed and the interest will be outrageous. So when I had written a decision in favor of the women and against the Securities and Exchange Commission, they asked me to change it. And although I could have been politically correct and probably found a reason not to change it based on my hospitalization, I said it's unethical, it's illegal, and it's immoral. I can't change a decision that I've already written. I've never been overturned on a decision. Why would I change it? And the three of them tried to pressure me, and I said, I'm going back to the hospital. I've given you my answer, I won't change it. And they sought to retaliate afterwards. I told them if they did change the decision that I would go public, that I would contact the two women, I would let them know that I wrote the original decision, that they changed it. As a matter of fact, it was changed so quickly, they only had a couple hours to do it, that the grammar is even incorrect in the decision. So it's an embarrassment to the EEOC to even have issued that decision.
A very compelling history and a tragic horror film.
I heard my son screaming again from a night terror. And I watched my husband get up out of bed, and he went into my son's room. And for some reason I just felt, don't move, don't get up right now. And it was really odd to see my husband get up and do anything, because he never helped take care of my children when they were babies, and I had to do everything. And I watched him, and he went in and he got my son and he took him out of the bedroom, and I watched him walk downstairs, and he was completely naked because we slept in our bed naked. And he took my son downstairs, and I just watched, and I was thinking initially, wow, that's nice. And then I thought, well, why is he taking him downstairs? And then I waited a couple minutes, and then I got up and I walked to the mid-level of the stairs, and I looked down, and he was laid out on the couch, much like this couch, actually very similar color. He was laid out, and he had my very young son with his diaper off over his groin, and he was bouncing him like this. And I looked down, and as I looked down, my son turned and looked back at me. And the look in his face was, "Help me, Mommy." And so I said, "Rod, what are you doing?" And he leaped up off the couch, threw my son down on the couch, and said, "Xander had a wet diaper." And I said, "Well," and I said, "Well, why didn't you just change the diaper and put him back to bed?" And he said, "Because I brought him down here to comfort him." And do you tell his wife what's happening? And she said, "Yes, one time I came out of the tub and I told her, and she got really mad and she pushed me on the floor and started kicking me and screaming at me and saying, 'Never say that again, and that is not true about your father, and that's horrible that you're saying those things about your father.'" Well, she came back after that first weekend, and I reported to CPS. The First Lady did not like what she was hearing me say. Then there was another lady put on it, and she talked to my children. She said she completely believed my children, and that if I was to hand my children over to their father, that I would be helping to have these children abused. And she said if she had to, she was going to put these children in the care of the court so that they did not go back. We go into court. She says this to the judge. The judge says, "I need these children to be evaluated by a detective. We go to a detective up in Orange County, which was where they live. The detective listens to my children. He comes out, this large man, and starts very angrily telling me that, your children, he said, your daughter, when she was asked, pointed to the front and to the back, and she obviously doesn't know what she's talking about, if her father's sticking her finger in her. She's pointing to the front and the back. She's so confused. And he said, and your son talks about all these things, and, it sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about too, and it sounds like he's been coached." And I said, I just didn't know what to say. And then that information was given to the judge, and the judge didn't like it, but continued with, and then the next thing I was given to Judge Brannigan, or this happened with Judge Brannigan, and then it did. I'm sorry. So Judge Brannigan was new on the case, and we went in, and this was all being done in front of Judge Brannigan at this point. And then after all this happened with the detective, I went back into court, and then Judge Brannigan said to me, "You are losing legal and physical custody of your children, and because you refuse to stop reporting abuse." And he said, "You are never allowed to report abuse on any child ever again." And my children, I was told that I was to hand my children from the court to the father right there, that they were not allowed to go back to the house. They were not allowed to say goodbye to their friends. They were not allowed to get any of their belongings. My children came out of childcare at the court, ran around the court, refused to go with their father, screaming, crying. The court guard came out. He looked at me. He said, "I am so sorry for what the judge did to you and your children. You need to appeal immediately."
This is a tragedy. Dr. Carlos Rivera, a loved pediatrician in Suffolk County for over 20 years, a graduate of Stony Brook University Medical School, is in jail for not keeping up with his $13,000 per month payments to his ex-wife. Now his ex-wife is on welfare. His kids lost their insurance, and we, the taxpayers of Suffolk County, are paying to keep Dr. Rivera in jail.
The story you're about to hear is testimony to the claim we often make at FIT, that our family courts are broken and not repairable. We discover only too late that a family court can reduce you to financial ruin, create familial dysfunction, and strip you of your dignity. Family court is the place where honesty is punishable and credential refutable, and where there is no cause and effect relationship between the well-being of your children and the process. Do not expect fairness from such an unfair system. As I always repeat my mantra, divorce is about relationships, and relationships cannot be adjudicated. Carlos is soon to be ex-Catherine were married for 15 years and had 4 children, now 16, 13, 10, and 6. Jamie, who's here, Jamie and her husband were married 8 years and had 2 girls, 12 and 11. This is Jamie Travers in the middle, and to her left, Gary Jacobs, family law reformer, to help me out with the program. Jamie, I know this is a lot to handle. I know it's a lot to handle. Tell us as much as you can about what happened to you.
It is. First, I think it's very important to say that Carlos is a pediatrician, and he's a very well-respected and loved pediatrician by thousands of patients. He was taken into custody. He was incarcerated on May 21st of 2013 for child support arrears. Those arrears resulted from 2009, a stipulation of settlement that he agreed to and he signed with his ex-wife at the time, which basically obligated him to pay over $15,000 per month in support. And we struggled with that for 4 years.
I want to stop you there for a second. I want the audience to know that even though he was brought in for child support and put in jail for child support, that he averaged some, as we understand it, some $14,000 to $15,000 a year. Is that right, or is it a month?
I think from what I understand, over the course of 4 years, he paid over $400,000.
Okay, so 4 years.
Over the course of 4 years, he paid out over $490,000.
Okay, now the average person doesn't spend over per year $15,000, $20,000 a year in child support. So this astronomical number.
Yes.
So go ahead from there.
I just have one question. What made him stop? He's in jail. What made him stop paying child support? That he got put into jail? He just stopped paying altogether?
No, he never actually stopped paying child support. He continued to struggle to pay as much as he could. We ran a pediatric practice. We started the practice together in 2009. And when we started, he had made that agreement already. And that agreement was based off a peak salary from when he was a partner at a pediatric practice that was grossing $2.2 million a year. When we started our new practice, that revenue just was not the same. He was a solo practitioner. So we struggled with that. I was the office manager and the nurse manager of that office and did not take a salary until July of 2012.
That's
and
to help along, to help
yeah,
build
to
it.
make sure that he can keep up with the support payments. Now, it wasn't $15,000 a month in child support. It was $15,000 a month in total support. That was the maintenance and the child support together, and all the other incidentals that were in his agreement. And to be quite honest, we struggled so much that we allowed the business to fail, and the business was very much near bankruptcy by 2011, 2012. So that's when the support payments started to subside a bit. And that's when he ran into trouble.
First of all, I just want to recap just really quick for the people who haven't seen the case on Dr. Carlos, which they can find on Facebook. He had a marriage several years, got divorced, signed a ridiculous agreement under duress, where there was this amount of child support and spousal support that he couldn't possibly maintain. But because he wanted to do the right thing, or he thought was the right thing by his family, he took the advice of his attorneys and signed the agreement to get it over with, figuring, okay, I'll do the best I can. He did the best he can. Some years he paid over $100,000 in a year, but still fell short because he couldn't pay approximately 85% of his pay, and ended up being sentenced to 6 months in jail. That's the very, very short version of what happened. There's plenty of other shows out there that you can see to see what happened. So let me ask Judy, because Judy is the first person. Carlos has had several lawyers, and Judy is the first person that actually took his case and took a holistic approach. Because when we've been speaking with Dr. Carlos, what we found is that every lawyer he went to took the case from that day and then looked forward at the current problem that he was having. It doesn't seem like anybody ever looked back to see from the beginning what's going on here. How did he get into this mess? What went wrong with his case?
I
think part of what went wrong was, like you said, the other lawyers had not gone back to day one. And in order to understand a case, you, in my opinion, have to start what happened on day one. You have to look at all those documents, and I always feel you need to know your client's case very well, or else you're walking into court and you're arguing just what someone else argued. There's nothing new. Go back to day one, understand the whole case history, and that brings you to today. And I've spoken with Dr. Rivera about that. It's like treating a medical patient. You just can't look at what the other doctor did. You have to go back to what happened with this patient's condition. The same way I'm looking at his case from day one, and I started to see all these things that went wrong, and everybody just kind of went off what the last person did and never went back to the beginning.
Even in Australia, the family court system needs to be reformed.
Interest in the family court system. I've got obviously a few viewers, and that is an issue that some people have raised with me as something they want to see changed and they feel is fundamentally broken in Australia. Tell me about your ideas and your observations of the system as it is.
David, even going back, the first time I was in Parliament, it was the biggest issue that came across our desk. Any parliamentarian's desk, they all know it. And even now, it is the biggest issue. I have people come up to me, you know, grown men just about ready to you know, break down in tears because they're not seeing their kids. The system is unfair. They're separated from their children. They have their whole system is, you know, is broken down. Now we have majority of people out there going through a divorce. They have to wait about 3 years, average about 3 years before they get into the court system. So I've actually having discussions with the Attorney General's office, Chief Justices of the Family Law Courts, barristers, solicitors, judges on the bench, who are all saying something has to be done about the system. Politicians, their attitude is it's too hard. Well, that's not good enough.
No.
When it affects the majority of people, you know, then you've got, you know, parents, then you have the kids of parents that are affected by it. You've got brothers and sisters and grandparents and everyone that's affected by it. Now let's go back, you know, what's the cause? The judicial system is broken down. You have overworked judges that do not have assistants, and I know a lot of judges that actually have to write up their own decisions, type up their own decisions. They don't even have the clerical staff.
Wow.
This is in New South Wales.
Wow.
They don't have clerical staff to write up their decisions. So that's weekend. Then you have judges that need more assistance as well as far as registrars. So when you go before the judge and he says, well, look, we're going to set this down for a mention date on such and such a time, instead of taking up that judge's precious time when he should be dealing with cases directly, we should have these people going before what is called as registrars.
Okay.
So they can do the work of a judge, and that will alleviate the pressure of the courts.
Okay.
Another big problem that's happened is that a lot of people self-represent themselves because they can't afford to pay for a solicitor.
Right.
They actually can't get legal aid. So legal aid has also broken down. One time, it wasn't so long ago, legal aid, we were paying about just over $11 per person. Now it's down to just over $7 per person.
Wow.
So they've cut back, yet it has increased the cases that come before the courts. So a lot more people are representing themselves. Now, because they don't understand the legal proceedings, the judge has to give them direction. That takes up the court's time.
Yeah.
So that needs to be addressed. And we've been actually advocating for increased legal aid to help people out there, and it will help alleviate the pressures on our courts.
We would like to remind you that these courageous whistleblowers are risking their lives every day, all the time.